So we're going to move from the oceans to Lake Erie, and Kaitlen will give her presentation. Kaitlen Lang recently defended her master's in biology. Congratulations. With an ecology concentration at the University of Toledo. She is placed within the office of the assistant administrator at NOAA's Oceanic and Atmospheric Research Office, where she works on stakeholder engagement in the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science. Outside of her professional life, she enjoys rollerblading. I miss rollerblading. I used to do it in Arizona. Baking roasted garlic Kalamata olive bread. Wow. And listening to podcasts. She'll be presenting some of her master's work in Dead Giveaway. Rising mortality rates suggest effectiveness of Lake Erie Grass Carp control. Take it away.
All right. Thank you, Lincoln. Hold on, I'm trying to minimize my video there. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. Like Lincoln said, my name is Kaitlen Lang, and I'm wearing multiple hats these days. I'm still a current graduate student at the University of Toledo, and I'm also a 2022 Knauss Fellow. And I'm really excited to be presenting my thesis research on grass carp mortality rates in the Great Lakes, specifically Lake Erie. So, just to get us started, I want to give you some context in history and kind of walk you through, the story of grass carp in the United States. So, in the early 1960s, grass carp were imported to the southern U.S. to help control aquatic vegetation in ponds. And concerns about grass carp, escaping and spawning in natural river systems prompted the development of a triploid or sterile grass carp in 1983. Grass carp have been captured by commercial fishers as early as the mid-1980s, but at extremely low numbers. No one was really paying too close of attention until about 2012, where a handful of diploid juvenile grass carp that originated from the Sandusky River were captured. And we know that they originated from the Sandusky River because of otolith microchemistry. So this means that the chemical signature of the bones in their head matched the chemical signature of the water. So we had our suspicions that grass carp might be spawning. And we started looking for grass carp eggs, and lo and behold, we found them just a few years later in the Sandusky River in 2015. And in 2018, this was the year that the first full-time strike teams were deployed to harvest as many grass carp as possible. So that was also the year that grass carp larvae were found in the Maumee River. So not only do we know that grass carp are spawning in at least 2 tributaries to Lake Erie Basin, they're also recruiting, which means they're surviving to a certain age. Which brings us to the most recent year of the grass carp story, in 2021, where we've seen continued increases in effort to manage grass carp. But why does this matter? Grass carp captures have been increasing in recent years, but this is probably due to more targeted effort and awareness associated with grass carp in Lake Erie. Most grass carp captured in the Western Basin are diploid, meaning they are capable of reproduction. And grass carp can harm aquatic ecosystems when abundant because they are voracious eaters. They can eat up to 100% of their body weight a day in submerged aquatic vegetation. So this could really spell trouble for the remaining wetland habitat in Lake Erie and the fish and wildlife that depend on this habitat to survive. Effort to manage grass carp is increasing. Every year we add more crews and more boats on the water to help remove grass carp from Lake Erie. So this shows that the number of crew days has increased over time. And crew days is our measure of effort here. So this is the total count of crews out on the water throughout the season. So for example, if we had 5 crews out on one day, we would count that as 5 crew days. So pretty simple. And this measure of effort I wanted to use because it just standardizes among the many different gear types used, both passive and active. And I like to color code the effort just by agency to show you how truly collaborative this project is. We have Department of Fisheries, Oceans, Canada. We have Michigan Department of Natural Resources, Ohio Department of Natural Resources, Division of Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Geological Survey, and the University of Toledo. So we have a lot of players in the game. But even with increasing collaborative effort, we still haven't been able to meet the removal goal of 390 fish per year since it was put into place in 2018. And this graph shows the number of grass carp captured has increased over time, but not enough to meet the harvest goal shown here in red. And here I've just color-coded captures by source. So we have agency, which largely represents the strike team effort in captures, commercial fishing captures, and public reports of captured grass carp. And the point I just want to make here is that strike teams are responsible for capturing the majority of grass carp in recent years. But despite that, if we're assessing management success by just the removal goal alone, we're not successful. But there might be other ways of getting at whether or not we're having an effect on the population. So since we haven't been able to meet our goals, we needed to find a better way than just total catch alone to measure management effectiveness. So catch numbers are valuable, but they have to be considered in terms of effort and viewed cautiously to infer abundance, which is why I paired this catch-effort relationship with mortality rates so that we could better assess changes in the grass carp population demographics in Lake Erie. So to answer the question, is removal affecting the grass carp population, this study had 4 objectives. So first, I wanted to measure the relationship between catch and effort. Next, age all grass carp captured in the Lake Erie Basin from 2014 to 2021. And then using these ages, examine changes in mortality over time using 2 different methods. And then finally, I just want to describe how mortality could be affected by removals. What is the relationship there? But first, let's take a look at the relationship between catch and effort. So I first wanted to gauge the relationship between catch and effort, just because from a management perspective, effort is really the lever that we can pull to harvest more fish. So I wanted to see how agency effort is correlated with the number of agency grass carp captured. So in this plot, I did not include any fish captured from commercial fishers or the public. And what I found is that agency effort had a strong positive relationship with the number of grass carp captured. Roughly 38 fish were captured every 100 effort days. So the more effort we exerted, the more fish we harvest, which is a relatively straightforward concept. But at a certain level of effort, we would expect to see diminishing returns in which increasing effort does not produce an increase in catch. But we don't know at which effort threshold this will happen. And we don't see that happening yet because there's no change in slope at higher effort and therefore no evidence of diminishing returns. So to me, this is a telltale sign that we're not yet overexploiting the population. And just a reminder that overexploitation is good when it comes to invasive species because it means we're depleting the population and therefore reducing the harm that this species causes. All right, so now that we know catch and effort are related, let's move on to aging all of our fish. So I used vertebrae as the primary aging structure for harvested fish because they were found to have the highest percent agreeance for age estimation out of any grass carp structure examined. I used dorsal fins as a non-lethal aging structure for the small number of fish that are tagged and released in the Lake Erie Basin. So I removed the bones. And then I clean them by boiling them, manually removing the tissue and bleaching them to improve readability of the annuli or years of growth. Very glamorous job. So once the structures were cleaned, I cross-sectioned them using a Buehler isomet low-speed saw. Generally 3 vertebrae or 2 dorsal fins per fish were sectioned, which gave us, a good amount of structures to view and be confident about our ages. So once they were cross-sectioned, structures were imaged using a Leica dissecting microscope. This just means that we used a fancy microscope to take pictures of them. And using only these images, 629 fish were aged using 2 independent readers, representing nearly 85% of all reported grass carp captured in the Lake Erie Basin since 2012. And here's just a photo of my colleague here, Ryan Young. He's a fish and wildlife biologist who sat down with me weekly over Microsoft Teams to estimate ages. So I really do thank him for his time. And I like to show a picture of what these structures look like once they've been sectioned and imaged, just because I think they're really cool. So on the left, we have an example of a sectioned vertebrae, and on the right, we have a sectioned dorsal fin. So the red dots correspond to each annulus or year of growth. And these structures are from 2 different fish, but they're both roughly 14 to 15 years old, which is you know, a little older than average of your average Lake Erie grass carp, but still within the ballpark. And I think they're cool looking. All right, so now that we've aged all of our fish, let's put these ages to work to estimate mortality. So I want to talk about 2 approaches to estimate mortality. So catch curves are kind of the more traditional way that fisheries biologists might be a little bit more familiar with. And it measures a linear decline in successive age classes. They're single year, which means they're analyzing the ages from each fishing season separately. And the assumptions are stable recruitment, equal catchability of all fully recruited ages, and stable mortality, which we'll address here in shortly. So the multi-level linear model is another approach to estimate mortality. And this method partially pools data across groups, in this case years, to estimate both within year and overall mortality. And it's important to note that we're using all of the same assumptions and all of the same data. They're very, very similar approaches, just the only difference is that we're pooling data in one, or partially pooling. So let's just take a deeper dive into catch curves. So a catch curve is a plot of the log number of fish sampled at successive ages to estimate the annual mortality of the species. So on the ascending limb, we see fish still recruiting to our gears. And on the descending limb, we see declines in the abundance of successive age classes, the slope of which we call instantaneous mortality, and can be used to calculate total annual mortality using the equation on the slide there. But I just want to touch on some of the assumptions going on behind the scenes here. So recall that one major assumption is that recruitment is stable throughout the study period. And when we talk about grass carp recruitment, we have to separate out different ploidy sources since the fish originated from different sources. So recall that diploids are fertile and most likely spawned in the Lake Erie Basin, and that triploids are sterile and are likely from aquaculture sources. So to find the cohort year, I subtracted the age of the fish by the year it was captured. Very simple concept, just trying to figure out when the fish was born. So what I found was that fish within a triploid or unknown ploidy status appear to have relatively stable recruitment in quotation marks here, but diploid recruitment does not appear to be equal across years. There's one relatively strong diploid cohort, and this is grass carp hatched in 2011. So since recruitment is not stable and there's one large cohort aging through time, our mortality analysis needed to address this. So one way to do this, or to mitigate the effects of a large cohort, is to standardize the age at which the mortality analysis started at for each year. And we decided to start at the line at the age of recruitment, which is another piece of the puzzle I had to figure out. So I don't think this is rocket science. A fish's age and size are correlated. Think smaller fish are younger and bigger fish are older. And one way to get at the age of recruitment is to look at the sizes of fish our gears are capturing. So what I did was create a histogram to see the distribution of lengths each of our gears were capturing, to see if there were any major anomalies. And what I found is that the majority of fish captured were 889 millimeters in total length or greater, and this holds true for all different gear types used. So what I did was take that 889 millimeters and see what age on average it corresponds to. So this is a lengthed age graph, and to make this I discarded any age group with fewer than 3 observations and estimated mean length at age for all ages between 1 and 20. I plotted out each observation in gray and average length at age in blue. So fish that were on average 889 millimeters or greater correspond to fish aged 5 or older. So we can conclude that on average fish are recruited to our gears at age 5. So let's go back to our catch curve and address the model assumptions, which are stable recruitment, equal catchability of all fully recruited fish, and stable mortality. While recruitment was found to be unstable, all fish, meaning diploid, triploid, and unknown ploidy, were included in the model to boost sample size and mitigate the effects of unstable diploid recruitment. We included fish from many different gear types, and the line started at the age of recruitment, which we determined to be age 5. And then as for the assumption of stable mortality, we assumed that mortality would increase due to increased fishing pressure in recent years. So, mortality is likely not stable throughout the study period. So what we did was calculate annual mortality rates and their associated confidence intervals from 2014 to 2021 and plot it out. And it looks something like this. So it's not very pretty. I think it's kind of difficult to discern a trend because of the large amount of uncertainty. We have really big error bars, but I think it's worth pointing out the unequal sample sizes across years, so denoted in green here. So because grass carp were largely incidentally captured prior to 2017, there were either few captures or few captures reported. So from this analysis alone, we really can't say with certainty whether or not control efforts have been successful. But let's take a look at the multi-level linear model. So this is another way of estimating annual mortality. Recall that it's very similar to the catch curves, but the multi-level model accounts for all years at once, which shrinks each year's mortality towards the overall mean. This process leads to a partial pooling of data across groups, which reduces estimation uncertainty. So this is a really effective way of addressing high uncertainty associated with a small sample size, which is exactly what we have with the grass carp data. So here we just have counts of each age class grouped within each year, which produces a relative mortality to the overall mortality. And I just want to reiterate that we are using all of the same data as the catch curve analysis. So when we plot out, mortality rates and their associated confidence intervals from 2014 to 2021, we can see that mortality is increasing over time, especially after control strategies began, denoted with the dashed line there. And the trend is much more visible with this model because the effect of partially pooling the data reduces the variance and uncertainty. So regardless of estimation method we used, mortality remains below 25%. So, what exactly does this mean, and how does this fit with other grass carp populations elsewhere? So unfortunately, there have been very few studies on wild adult grass carp mortality, especially in their native range. It's almost unknown. I couldn't find any value from their native range, just that the population was in decline due to a loss of habitat and overfishing. One spawning invasive grass carp population in the Mississippi River had a 40% annual mortality rate. But these fish were of smaller length at age than Lake Erie grass carp. So populations that are near carrying capacity are likely to be regulated by density dependent processes, which may be the case for the Mississippi River grass carp. So one recent study estimated that Lake Erie grass carp total annual mortality rates were around 25%, but this number was combined with limited catch data and values from the literature, reflecting high uncertainty. So our study showed that mortality rates were much lower than previously estimated, but we believe this number to be a more accurate representation of Lake Erie grass carp population dynamics. So compared to the Mississippi River population, the lower mortality rates and larger length at age for Lake Erie grass carp suggests that the population is not resource limited in the Great Lakes. Invasive fish tend to grow rapidly in the early stages of invasion, translating to a larger length at age. So this suggests that grass carp in Lake Erie may be early on in the invasion curve, despite several decades of residence. So we believe that our current control efforts are well timed to prevent future population increase and spread. All right, so now that we've estimated mortality, let's describe how removals and mortality are related. So here I calculated the total number of fish removed by combining captures by agencies, commercial fishing, and the public. So this total did not include the small number that are tagged and released in the Lake Erie Basin. So what we see is that the annual mortality rate is correlated with the number of grass carp removed annually. The more fish that are removed, the more mortality increases. Roughly every 100 grass carp produces 100 grass carp removed produces a 5% increase in mortality. So that's a really interesting piece of the puzzle when we think back to how the number of fish captured increases with the amount of effort exerted. All right, so now that we've completed all of our objectives, we can start to wrap up here. So regardless of method, grass carp mortality rates appeared to increase despite the relatively short time span and limited number of catches. The more effort we exerted, the more fish we caught. The more fish we caught, the greater the mortality increased. So these results suggest that control efforts are likely having a measurable effect on the population. And furthermore, we don't see diminishing returns on effort yet, which is a telltale sign that we're not yet overexploiting the grass carp population, which means we could justify increasing effort in the coming years to increase removals, which is expected to happen this upcoming season. And then finally, I just want to end on this note here. So while still in its preliminary stages, a spawning barrier will be installed in the coming years on the Sandusky River, which is the most used spawning river and the largest source of grass carp recruitment in the Great Lakes. An increased effort, concentrated removals, and a spawning barrier continue to be the best methods we have to manage the grass carp population. So with that, I can take any questions, but I also do want to take the time to thank all of our wonderful partners and funding sources on this project. I would say that it takes a village, sometimes a circus, to collect all of this data, and without them, this project would not have been possible. So thank you very much, and here is my contact information if you need it.
Thank you so much, Kaitlen. I appreciate your presentation, and I hope people will reach out to you at your email address. Audience, we have about 10 minutes for your questions. So again, if you have them, and this is a great time to ask them, please type them into the questions box, which is located in the webinar control panel on the right side of the screen. And please consider downloading Kaitlen's slides, which she has graciously supplied for us, which are again in the control panel on the right side. And while we wait for some questions, I do want to put in a ruthless plug for our Knauss fellows today. If you know anyone who'd be interested in Heather or Kaitlen's works, I am recording these sessions. So please share the recordings of the presentations, which I'll be uploading to the NOAA Central Library YouTube channel in just a few hours. And I've provided a link in the chat to our playlist, which focuses on our current cohort as well as the cohort recordings from the past. And we got our first question. So Kaitlen, this question asks, can you use this research to estimate how many more fish agencies should catch and how much this would cost?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Yes, I have. So we can use these mortality parameters to create a new removal goal. I don't want to share that right now just because it's a little preliminary, but wait for the manuscript that will be coming within the next year. But yeah, so that's a really interesting question. And as far as it goes, with cost, my collaborator and lab mate Rob Hunter is looking at, what's the most cost-effective way to catch these fish, because they're very elusive and they're hard to catch. So how can we best, maximize our time spent on the water to catch as many as possible? So research is ongoing.
She added compared to costs of AIS. I don't know if you want to address that.
Yeah, I think that's what I addressed. AIS is an aquatic invasive species, and
my apologies. Yeah.
That's okay. I was going to say the best way to manage aquatic invasive species is to just prevent them from coming into new novel environments in the first place. That's the most cost-effective way, and to really catch them when the population is less abundant and less established, which is what we're doing with the grass carp program. Even though we're catching hundreds of fish per year, that's not really a whole lot, but I think it's impressive that despite limited catches, we are having an effect on the population, which means that the population might be a lot smaller than we originally thought. So I think that's really encouraging.
Excellent, thank you. Here's a compliment and a question. Thanks for the great presentation, Kaitlen. I might have missed it, but are there any natural predators?
Oh, that's also a good question. So grass carp grow very, very rapidly. They can reach 600 millimeters in their first year of life. So that's over, half a meter, long. I think they grow a little bit too fast for natural predators to really take advantage of them as a food source. But I think that's something to look into going forward. Like how can we use grass carp biology against them to try and reduce the population? So thank you for the question.
This next question asks, do you anticipate expansion of this project beyond the Sandusky, Cuyahoga, and Maumee in 2022 to other tributaries in northern Ohio?
Yes, we have more strike teams spawning for the 2022 season. There's going to be a lot more effort in the Eastern Basin. We've mostly been focused on the Western Basin of Lake Erie. So we're, really excited to see what that might look like, and hopefully we don't find too many more. But yeah, so we also have strike teams spawning in Lake Michigan. So this is a really collaborative effort trying to just take a census of how many grass carp are actually out there, and how can we get rid of them or better manage them so that they don't become a nuisance.
Wonderful. This question asks, would musky fish who eat carp be a good addition to stocking efforts in those tributaries?
Well, I'll say that muskie populations are pretty high in the St. Clair and Detroit rivers, which we don't normally find grass carp over there. As far as stocking muskie into waters to see if they'll eat grass carp, I'm a little skeptical of, but it couldn't hurt, and if it increases sport fish and awareness of grass carp problem in the Great Lakes, then yeah, that might be a good thing going forward. Excellent.
Well, I'm going to give the board a second to see if any more questions come in. But thanks again for your presentation, and a reminder to anyone who watches the recording of this, please feel free to contact Kaitlen at her NOAA email address. It's kaitlen.lang@noaa.gov. It appears that was our last question. So again, thank you everybody, Heather, Kaitlen, and Lincoln for being a fabulous host and showcasing your work today. I hope you have a fabulous year at NOAA, and I'm looking forward to hearing about how your cohort year goes. And a shout out to the Knauss Lunch and Learn Committee for putting together this webinar series. We're looking forward to a year of many more presentations from the 2022 class. Audience, please join NOAA Central Library again next month for our Knauss Lunch and Learn webinar. It's hosted the third Thursday of the month at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and learn more about the work of this fabulous group of fellows. So enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope to see you again on May 19th. Thank you very much, everybody.